Welcome back, guys. In our lesson today, we're focusing on revising photosynthesis. We've just spent some time looking at the various processes. Now let's look at the application of our understanding to a few questions. I challenge you to join me in this. As I work through these questions, pull out your paper, write down some of your answers. And as we go through this, you can check and see if you understand these concepts well. Remember that it's important that you revise by taking questions from previous exam papers, looking at your question books or your textbooks for questions and trying to attempt them by literally writing down these answers. And that's the best and most effective way of actually seeing if you now have understood the concepts. Let's try that and let's see how we interpret questions and how we're able to access our understanding and apply that to different questions. So the first set of questions, again, are generally the multiple choice questions, often easy but can be confusing. Let's look at the first description. The role of chlorophyll during photosynthesis. As I mentioned, chlorophyll earlier on is a pigment that is responsible for absorbing the sunlight. So again, it's important that when you read the question, read the different aspects of either the description or the question. So let's read further. A, it's a catalyst in the combination of carbon dioxide and water. B, as one of the products. C, as one of the reactants. Or D, to convert light energy into other forms of energy. And that's an interesting one because there are some obvious ones that we can easily eliminate. So there's options between A and C, and that's A and D, sorry, so we've got to choose between these two. And clearly if we look at, is there a catalyst in the combination of oxygen, carbon dioxide and water? That's certainly not true. And the most correct answer in this would be the conversion of light energy into other forms of energy. As I mentioned, it would be spot on if you guessed or if you figured out that it was D. Let's move on to the next question. The oxygen set free during photosynthesis comes from the breakdown of, and that's interesting because when we looked at the process of oxygen being produced, we realized that during photolysis, that the light energy during photolysis split up this into hydrogen and your oxygen molecules. So where did that happen? That happened in the first process, which is we call the light dependent phase. So let's look at the options. Okay, so where did that come from? So the oxygen set free during photosynthesis comes from the breakdown of glucose. That's not correct. The breakdown of carbon dioxide. That's not correct. The breakdown of light. That's not correct. And as I mentioned, the most correct answer here is the breakdown of water. And that process is called photolysis, splitting up water, which releases your hydrogen atoms, which are the energy molecules, as well as your oxygen. And that is then released into the atmosphere as a waste product. Spot on if you got that correct. Which of the following is an energy carrier in living organisms? I've mentioned this a few times. I've spoken about the process of a phosphate being added on, and I use the term phosphorylation, which again points to how ADP plus a phosphate forms ATP. And this process is called phosphorylation. Now let's look at our options. So the options are, which of the following, I'm going to read the question again so that we understand the question properly before we attempt. Which of the following is an energy carrier in living organisms? Is it light? That's not correct. Glucose is not an energy carrier. It's a fuel that actually is needed to provide the energy during cellular respiration. So that's not correct. Chlorophyll, guys, that's the pigment that is used in the absorption of light. And finally, as I mentioned, this is ATP or adenosine triphosphate. And so this answer would be the correct answer, D. Which of the following is essential before a cell can photosynthesize? So we need to know which of the following is essential. ATP energy is needed, heat energy is needed, radiant energy, or chemical potential energy. Right, guys, it's important that we read the concept of before a cell can photosynthesize. Remember that the basic requirement for photosynthesis is light. And as you would see, it's the radiant energy that is needed. And so the answer there would be radiant energy. Let's look at 6. What is the most essential requirement for a cell when it uses radiant energy for the production of food? So, is it a large amount of oxygen, or a large vacuole, certain pigments, or stored food? So guys, the basic process of photosynthesis requires the basic raw materials, which are carbon dioxide and water, but we know that it happens in the chloroplast, and that chloroplast contains a pigment, which is chlorophyll. And so we need these pigments, and these pigments are crucial to absorbing the radiant energy and using that energy to carry out various different chemical reactions, like splitting up water. So the answer there would be C. Right, let's look at the next question, and we'll get through that by looking at the various options that are given. The question reads, indicate whether each of the following descriptions in column 1 and 2 apply to A only, B, both A, or none of A and B, or neither A and B. So guys, often in these questions you have 4 options per description, and you've got to choose whether it's A, B, both A and B, or neither. And these get quite confusing, and it's important that you read the descriptions and then evaluate the terms that are given. So let's try that out. So here we've got column 1, the molecule that stores energy. Okay, we know that molecules that store energy in the cell, as we've just mentioned, is called ATP. ADP is what is a de-energized molecule which has released the energy. It does have energy, but it doesn't have enough to actually support the process. So the answer here would be A only, which is ATP. Right, well done if you were able to get that. Let's look at the next one. The organelle in which photosynthesis takes place. That's an easy one, guys. We've been discussing photosynthesis. We've looked at the structure. And so the organelle in which photosynthesis takes place is the chloroplast. So it's B only. And if you cannot remember that respiration happens in the mitochondria. Also an important process, but in this case, it is not the organelle that photosynthesis takes place in. The storage of chlorophyll, guys, let's see, is it in the grana or is it in the lamella? If you go back, again, remember that it's in none of these. And why would I say none? Because it's stored in the thylakoids. If you remember, those tube-like structures or disc structures, those were the structures. And the grana is a collection of the thylakoids. So the most correct answer here would be the thylakoids, which is those structures, and neither grana nor lamella. As we wrap this question up, let's get to the next 2. The light-dependent phase of photosynthesis. Guys, this was the first step that we looked at. What happens during the first process? We saw that it happens in the grana. So here we've got the options of the matrix and the stroma. Unfortunately, it's in neither of these, because we know that it happens only in the grana, which is the first phase of photosynthesis. Finally, the gas given off by green plants during photosynthesis. Guys, we know that oxygen is the waste product that is produced at the end of photosynthesis, and that is predominantly the gas that is released. We do know that plants give off carbon dioxide, but that is a waste product from cellular respiration. That's not what the question points to. It points to the gas that is produced during photosynthesis, and hence it is A only. Well, guys, we've just looked at some basic application to understanding the processes. Let's have a little break, and when we get back, we'll try and look at some more complex questions that require a deeper understanding and application of photosynthesis. So see you in a bit, have a stretch break, and we'll catch you at the end of that.